Well, let's go ahead and get started, shall we? Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Kimberly Henshaw, the head of the Chinese Language, Culture, and Business Initiatives at Georgia State University's Office of International Initiatives. And on behalf of the Atlanta Global Studies Center and GSU's Office of International Initiatives, I'd like to welcome you to a special event for Global Scholar candidates, Hindsights and Insights from the Ground. This event is open to students who have taken 3 or more Global Scholars courses. So if you received an invitation, that means you are on your way to receiving the Global Scholar distinction from Georgia State University. This event will help you to better understand what it is really like working for international companies and organizations. Our panelists will share with you their insights from the ground and also in hindsight, what they wish they would have known or learned while they were still a student. Today, we are joined by 3 wonderful young leaders from the World Affairs Council of Atlanta, Ayodeji, Maxine, and Stefan. Thank you for being with us today. Between them, some of them have graduated from Georgia State or Georgia Tech. Some are enrolled in MBA programs at Georgia State or Emory, and they have various working experiences at the Georgia Department of Economic Development, MailChimp, Metro Atlanta Chamber, and some recognizable Fortune 500 companies and international corporations such as UPS, Siemens, HBO, ESPN, and others. But let's hear it from them directly. So first, I would love for each of you just to give an introduction and a little bit about what you do now and anything you'd like to share with the group. So Ayodeji, why don't we start with you?
Thank you very much. So my name is Ayodeji Babatunde. I'm originally from Nigeria, Lagos, Nigeria, actually the largest city in West Africa. So a bit background about my professional experience. I've worked in the telecommunications industry for about 5 years, which was focused on West Africa and Middle East. Then I joined UPS in the global freight forwarding. So I was working in the headquarters, which actually expanded my experience in international business side of the business ecosystem. So right now, I'm actually the business strategies for Outliers, which I founded. And what Outliers does is provide business strategies for medium and micro businesses. And I'm also a global shaper, which is a World Economic Forum initiative. So because I'm very passionate about social impact and how I can contribute my expertise to social good, that's actually one of the reasons why I joined Global Shapers. So
wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, great. So great to be here. Thank you, Kimberly, for the intro and for inviting us all to participate. So hi, everyone. My name is Maxine. So my current job, I work at MailChimp. So I'm on the customer success organization as a partner success manager. So day-to-day responsibilities is really managing kind of high value relationships with our global partners. So MailChimp services people all over the world. Actually more than 50% of our user base is outside the US. So I work with partners who are mostly marketing agencies and freelancers that are working with clients around the world using the MailChimp platform. So about 85% of the partners I work with are located outside of the US. My background is in international business. I actually started out in education, ironically, before pivoting into international business. So started out teaching abroad. Really enjoyed teaching. So I came back stateside and got my master's in teaching French and taught high school French for a while before deciding to go back to school. I actually did my MBA in international business at Georgia State University. So I did a really cool dual degree program with Georgia State and the University of Paris. They don't actually offer that program anymore, which is very sad. I know there's still the Master's in International Business, which is a wonderful program as well. But yeah, and after that, kind of moved into this international business space. I worked at the Georgia Department of Economic Development for 5 years. Started out on the international relations team. So more on the protocol diplomacy side of things, helping, manage governors' missions and relations with our consular corps network in Georgia and the Southeast. And then moved over to the International Trade Division, which you'll hear from Stefan about as well. So Stefan and I are former colleagues over in international trade at the Department of Economic Development. And essentially in that role, we're working with small to mid-sized businesses across the state of Georgia, helping them export products and services. So a lot of people don't realize, but Georgia has international representation all over the world. So these are folks located on the ground in different international markets. And those were kind of the people we worked with to help counsel those small businesses on how to be successful internationally. So did that for a while before moving over to MailChimp. Again, still working in that international space, just a slightly different role. But yeah, really excited to be here and share some insights with the students. It's been a while since I was in those shoes, but I do remember what it was like to be young and thinking about career in the international space. So just excited to be sharing some insights today.
Thank you, Maxine. And last but not least, Stefan.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here, and thank you everybody for joining. My name is Stefan Harrigan. I am Manager for Global Business Development at the Metro Atlanta Chamber. If you aren't familiar with the Chamber and what we do, shorter answer is we do quite a lot of things, but kind of the short summary is that we act as a voice for the business community, for the Metro Atlanta region's business community. We cover a number of different areas. One dimension is policy, so advocating for business-friendly policies and workforce-friendly policies, primarily at the state level. We also work to promote the region internationally and nationally. We have a sports council that's dedicated to attracting major sporting events. So one of the major big successes that we had was getting Atlanta selected as a host city for the 2026 FIFA World Cup, which we're very, very excited about. Will be held at Mercedes-Benz. And then also within MAC, we have an economic development division. And within that economic development division is the team that I'm on, Global Commerce. And it's rather unique for a chamber to have an international organization within it. And really what we do is work on all things inbound and outbound. And so what I mean by that is we work with companies that are either interested in locating in the Metro Atlanta region, so foreign-owned enterprises that are interested in either having manufacturing here, offices, sales, things of that nature, but also on the outbound side, supporting companies looking to export and to grow internationally. And really one of our main roles in that aspect is being what we oftentimes call resource brokers, connecting people with the people that they need to interact with and engage with to be successful on an international level. So that's just a little bit about what I do. I moved to the chamber just a few months ago from the Georgia Department of Economic Development, as Maxine mentioned, another fantastic organization, and we'll share some insights further on in this discussion that I've learned from both roles.
Thank you so much. Before we begin our discussion, I'd just like to go over a few housekeeping items. First, this session is being recorded and will be made available to the Global Scholars candidates. And we welcome your questions at any time throughout the program. Feel free to type them into the Q&A. If there are questions that you like from others, just give them a thumbs up and they'll be moved to the top of the list. But we're going to go ahead and get started with, I have some questions that I want to ask each of our panelists to first share some unique insights into what they've learned from working for these international companies and organizations. So in no particular order, just whomever would like to answer first or second or third. The first question that I have is often when talking about traveling, we know about culture shock, the excitement and the nerves that accompany it going into a foreign country and the culture shock that brings. So I was wondering if you could share if you experienced culture shock in the sense of going in to work for your company or your organization, and what was scary or exciting about it. Who would like to go first?
I'm happy to take a stab at that first. I think, and this particularly pertains to being at MAC now at the Metro Atlanta Chamber. I had worked pretty frequently with the folks here at MAC and kind of knew what to expect. But I think one of the major kind of unexpected dimensions was just how forward-facing the organization is. So we're an incredibly engaged community organization. We're not just engaged with the business community, but with the Consular Corps, with trade offices, with international service providers, really a whole range of organizations, both nonprofit and private, and really the extent to which we are a public-facing organization. I always knew that MAC was very engaged, but now being at the organization, realizing there are events practically every single day. You're expected to speak, you're expected to be not just a representative of the organization, but really the business community here in the region. And so it's a high level of responsibility, but it's also incredibly exciting. And so that's just been something I've been getting more used to, just being incredibly forward facing, but it also, I think that comes with quite a number of opportunities. You meet an incredible array of people, and building relationships is one of the most incredible things, I think, of being in an international organization. And so, yeah, through that's just been a wonderful opportunity.
Thank
I
you.
can go next. So for me, having worked in a diverse team in terms of the tribal diversity in Middle East and Africa, joining UPS, which is a North American region and is a global headquarters, which actually interface with all the global regions that UPS has subsidiaries. So it was pretty shocking because there were certain things that I expected. My team was pretty diverse. We had one of the managers was actually from Taiwan. We had one from China. We had another person from India, and I'm from West Africa. And then we had some Americans as well. So, it was super diverse, and everyone bringing their different perspective and the backgrounds into the workplace was actually fantastic. I felt like that was, for me, that was the height of my experience in a global company. And then also there were some certain business resource groups that most big organizations have, which also expand your exposure to different cultures. So for instance, when I joined UPS, the fourth quarter, they had this Diwali festival. I'd never even heard about that or participated in that, where you have a lot of our colleagues dress in their beautiful attire, and then, you get to taste some of their food and the culture and what celebration. I feel like, having that diversity and that cultural impression in the workplace is actually very, very, very beautiful. And another thing that was also a culture shock is you always have to have like an elevator pitch, because you could be in the elevator and you could be with the CEO, just going to your workplace. So you might decide to actually have a conversation with you. So you need to understand the value you bring into your team. So just in case, you never know. So it's actually a culture shock because, you interface with the C-suite professionals and then that are making business decisions within the organization. And so you kind of always have to be ready. So that was really beautiful to see, actually. That's one of the takeaways for me. And okay, so one more thing I wanted to say is actually also part of the cultural diversity. Well, so back in Nigeria, every Friday you get to, wear your business, the business casual, but it's African print, but in America, in North America here, everyone just kind of wears casual. So every time I go to work on Fridays, I try to wear like an African print, so people can say, oh, where are you from? And then you have an opportunity to actually take them into your own word to explain to them. Yeah, so that was fantastic.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, this is such an interesting question because, when it's first framed, it's asking about company, the culture shock you've experienced at different companies, which is a little bit different to me when I think about just culture shock in general, visiting another country or just experiencing travel. I will say, so I joined MailChimp earlier this year, and prior to joining the company, I had spent most of my career in the public sector. So jumping from, working in government and, the public education space to working for like a big tech company, had its, definitely a culture shock, right? Again, not the traditional culture shock you think of, right, when you're traveling to a foreign country, but definitely a different speed of doing things. It's a big organization. I was not, in my last job, I was used to knowing every single person by name, in the department where I worked and knowing who to go to for everything. So there was a little bit of a learning curve there, and just, different tools that are being used, the pace of how things run was definitely different when I joined. So yeah, I think anytime you kind of make a big switch like that, there's always going to be that shock element. I think in terms of, again, the more traditional way we think about culture shock, right? Visiting and traveling and doing business in other countries. I've had lots of different experiences. I think it's part of what makes working in the international space so exciting. I think that goes back to what Ayodeji was saying, right? Like having interacting with diverse cultures really becomes an enriching experience. But I would say, just in terms of for the students listening, like the part that's going to make you successful is just being prepared for that. And that different, can be challenging, especially in the, work environment. But the more you can educate yourself on those differences, the more prepared. You're never going to be fully prepared. There's always going to be an element of this is new, this is different, or you think it's going to be one way, it turns out a different way. But doing some of that work on the front end, and also I think just being flexible, I think that's key to being successful in international business and working in this space, is learning to go with the flow and learning to adjust and adapt to the culture that you're in. So my last job, working in international trade, I covered a couple different international trade shows that we would go to every year, and they were in different locations. And, just the business, it's so interesting when you go to some of these international shows, because there's so many different cultures coming together. And, we would travel with Georgia companies who, were looking to do business with customers all around the world. And they're meeting, with people from 50 different countries within the span of 4 days, right? And so, while you're, maybe that show is happening in Germany or wherever, you're interacting with people from all different cultures. So you just you have to adapt, and people's sense of time is different. So you set an appointment for 2 o'clock on Tuesday, and they don't show up until Wednesday at 3, right? And you just I had to explain, that some people, in certain cultures, the sense of time is very different. They look at set appointments very differently than how we do in the US. So I think being flexible and learning to just adapt in those situations is really key to being successful in this space.
I absolutely agree. One of my go-to phrases is that you need to become comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that definitely works into that too. So I know, Stefan, you already kind of answered this question, but if you want to elaborate more, or if others want to jump in, did you go into your positions with any kind of preconceived ideas of what it was going to be like, what you were going to expect, and and were your assumptions correct, or not? How did that work out?
Yeah, I might have jumped the gun and kind of merged the questions there, but I think from a kind of day-to-day skills-based dimension, I was pretty comfortable and new, and there were similarities to my old role, and just based off of having worked with the predecessor in that role quite a fair bit, I kind of knew what that was going to be like. I think what was perhaps different was just the level of autonomy provided and afforded, and it also expected that there's certain objectives that we have. I'm not talking kind of hard numeric metrics, but really just expectations in terms of being active and engaged, and trying to find opportunities to connect with different industries, with different organizations, and so really being autonomous and kind of knowing how to knowing when to reach out for help, but then also just being able to take that on. Each role is different, every organization is different, so those expectations will vary depending on what you're doing and which organization you're at. But just that kind of that level of responsibility has been something I really enjoy, but certainly something that you get a little adjusted to, and kind of maneuver anew. Still pretty early on in my tenure here, but certainly learning a fair bit very quickly. Maybe hand it over to one of the other.
Yes, yeah, hand it on over, whoever wants to jump.
So this is an interesting question. Yeah, like what you think a job is going to be, and then you get into the role and what it actually is. I don't think they're ever fully one and the same. I think though, again, having recently made a little bit, a switch in my job, I actually, my current role that I'm in, I do feel like it's turned out to be pretty close to what I thought it was going to be. But at the same time, I think all like, there is no perfect job description. When you read a job description, it's never going to be, and everyone like interprets a job description a little bit differently too. So it's never going to be exactly what you think it is. Which I would say, again, giving advice to the listeners on this call, like always ask questions during interview processes, not just for a job, but an internship, anything that you're doing, the more questions you ask, I think that can reveal a lot about what's to come. But I guess the other piece of that is, you know, there's, like I said, there's always going to be aspects, I think, of jobs that are not what you expect them to be, but I always think there's opportunities to kind of lean into the aspects of the job that you really enjoy, and to kind of, you know, not be afraid to have conversations with supervisors or people on the team about, you know, I really like this part of the job. Are there opportunities to do more of this? You know, I think it's natural for jobs to shift over time too. I think a lot of people, I mean, even when I think my last role, you know, what it looked like starting out, and I was at the department for 5 years, but I held different positions, right? So I think it's important to always be kind of doing almost internal debriefs with yourself about what you like about your job, what you don't like about your job, and then, okay, I want to do more of this. And then again, having those conversations with whoever your supervisor is, so that they know, and so that they can continue to surface those opportunities for you to continue to grow, you know, your career in the direction you want to take it in. So yeah, I don't know. I took that on a little bit of a tangent, but hopefully it was helpful in some regard.
Yeah, I'm gonna dwell on what you said, Maxine, because I remember when I was, you know, accepting the opportunity. I mean, it was global marketing, so I thought, oh yeah, we're gonna do all this fun stuff. You know, it's marketing. What could possibly go wrong? But one thing that has been quite consistent is most companies and most departments make data-driven decisions. So no matter what the unit you're in, you have to deal with data, because you might be tasked with making recommendations about your department or the project you're on. You need to know your numbers. So no matter, even if it's marketing, you know, it's going to be fun, but you know, data is super, super important. It's like the new oil, so to speak. So I would say that was the assumption I had coming in, like, oh yeah, it's gonna be fun. But then I was faced with, you know, when during the season when we have business planning, we have to deal with investor relations. There is no how you would not be faced with data. So no matter how you know, not data focused the position is. And another thing I would also say is, you know, even if you have a perception about what your job would look like, if it's not what it looks like, you can actually, of course, talk to your line manager or your director or your VP, depending on who you're reporting to, if you could be part of a project in another team. So say, for instance, you want to go into the corporate events, for instance, you know, you could actually try to see how your team can collaborate with that team and still drive value for the business. So that is very critical in terms of, in case you're not getting exactly what you hope to get, you know, there are always opportunities to explore other fields or teams. And of course, when you do that, you build relationship. And if there is an opportunity to join that team, of course, you already have experience working on projects with that team. So it kind of just expands your knowledge and also your impact within the organization. And also, it's also built your personal brand within the company.
For sure, and build your skill set
Absolutely.
across multiple different departments as well. And you don't know if you don't ask, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Just to tag on, I love that, the building relationships piece too. And I know this is a question I think you asked later on, like, but like that is key, I think, in any organization you go into, like building those relationships with other cross-functional teams and departments. Like that is, to me, a huge key to success. And again, will open up those opportunities if you do want to move into a different space within that organization.
For sure. So maybe this is your answer to the next question that I have. Let's see, maybe you can add to it as well. You know, because I also want to make sure we spend time talking about Hindsights as well. So before we move on, is there anything unique about working for international companies or organizations that you've learned that you'd like to share with the students? We've already talked about you know, diversity and being able to be in really international communities and learn about different cultures and peoples as well. But anything else?
I would say that for companies, for, Fortune 500 companies like that, you need to understand that you need to understand international business in terms of adjusting to support. For instance, if your company has operations across other regions, you need to be able to understand the timing and also adjust accordingly, because that could impact your project delivery. So understanding that is quite unique for companies like that. That's what I would add.
Yeah, I was reflecting on this question before the webinar, and I think one of the things, like the biggest I don't know, something unique, or one of the biggest takeaways I guess I've had from working in international business is the more I work in the international space, the more I realize how truly interconnected our world is.
Yeah.
And I think the education you guys are getting right now, being part of a global scholars program and having that, that outlook on everything you're doing, that thinking about things globally, is going to benefit you in the long run, even if you're not working for a quote unquote international company. To me, there's no such thing as a company that's not international, because truth be told, when you think about how global supply chains work, even if you are working for a company where they're only selling to, the US market, it's still probably an international company, because they're probably sourcing materials from somewhere else. They probably have outsourced maybe even some service level work to, other countries. So it's so rare to find a company that truly, is not international at all. Either the supply or on the supply side, or on the output side. So I think you guys having that background really is going to benefit you, and that's just one of the things I think is just continually reinforced in all the experiences I've had and the jobs I've had working with international businesses, that there's nothing that's not international. You can, once you start digging, you will see the connection is there.
Yeah, just really quickly before we kind of move on to the hindsight piece. In every role that I've sought out, I always knew that I wanted to have an international dimension to it, and I wanted to be very internationally engaged and connected, and that just needed to be a fundamental piece. And I think reflecting on that, why that is, one of the big reasons is because it's so incredibly rewarding and enriching. You can have an hour-long conversation with somebody from Pakistan or France or Chile, and you can be reading the news and keeping up to date, but getting their insights and getting their, understanding what their priorities are, what are they seeing on the ground, and whether it's business or social or politics, it's incredibly rewarding, and it just helps you have a more dynamic and broader view, not just personally, but of the world, of a certain region or country, and I think it helps you, especially if your role is inherently international. It helps you be able to better serve that role and be able to serve the people that you're working with, because you can draw on this knowledge that you have, and yeah, essentially, I think just be more dynamic in your position.
I absolutely agree. Thank you, panelists, for those sharing those insights. I wholeheartedly agree with all that you said. Coming from an international degrees and background myself, I'm in your kitchen reading your mail. We're all on the same boat, and I love it. So I want to talk now a little bit about hindsights and thinking back to when you were an undergrad student, and before you set out into the workforce and into the workplace. And Georgia State does offer study abroad programs. So just out of curiosity, before you started your careers, did you study abroad or travel abroad before you graduate? And tell us a bit about maybe those experiences, and especially if they currently impact the work that you do now. Is there a thread that you can connect?
I can jump in. So I guess short answer, yes, I did study abroad in undergrad. It was, I think going into college, I knew it was something I wanted to do. I think my only regret was that I didn't do it for a longer period of time. I did a summer study abroad, and I studied French. I was a double major of French and political science in college. And so I went and studied abroad in France for a summer. Absolutely loved it. I think it was part of, I fell in love with not just the language, but the culture and the experience. It wasn't my first time out of the country, but it was the first time I'd spent, significant amount of time outside of the country. Yeah, and my only regret was to not do it longer. I wished I had gone for either like a whole semester or a whole year. I made up for it later because after I graduated, I moved to France to teach English because I wanted more. And I would say like those between the study abroad and, deciding to, teach abroad after college, like huge impact on my career and just I think, one, just on impact on me as a person and my ability to adapt to new cultures, because you're kind of, when you study abroad and you're immersed and you're there, you're just forced into having to, learn that flexible, being uncomfortable, or no, being comfortable with the uncomfortable, as you said, Kimberly. I'll never forget when I decided to move there and like just doing things that you take for granted that take so much longer and are so much harder, like getting a cell phone, setting up internet for my apartment, like those things, which I had studied French in college, but reading, 18th century literature and writing a report on that is very different from having to set up internet in your home and being on the phone with tech support in French. So I think those experiences, it was just very eye-opening. I think it created a sense of real empathy for anyone who goes through that process, which I think empathy is really key to being successful in the international space, being able to put yourself in other people's shoes and understand the challenges. I mean, even today in my day-to-day, I am on calls with our partners all over the world, and all of these calls are in English, but having been in the shoes of somebody who has had to, work and speak in a language that's not my first language, I understand how difficult it is. So I've learned, my approach to things, or how I, slowing down my conversation, or just, again, being able to put myself in their shoes and know like, oh, it's really hard to be on business calls. And when it's not your first, even if you're very skilled at the language, it's still challenging. So like 100% those experiences impacted who I am today, both just on a personal level, but also on a professional level. I also think they do, if you're interested in a career in international business in the international space, I think having those cross-cultural experiences are highly valued by employers, even if it is just a 6-week study abroad over the summer. I think international companies, they're looking for people. They need people with the hard skills to be able to do the job, but they need people with the soft skills as well. And I think you can really learn those soft skills when you're doing something like studying abroad and being in that culture and having those experiences firsthand. So I know it's not something everyone can swing. I know it's expensive. There are scholarship programs and things available. So, go after those if you can, because it's very much worthwhile.
Yeah, I will add to that. So regarding what you said about, if you have the opportunity to take a study abroad, take it. So I'm currently doing my MBA at Georgia State. And one of the things that I'm doing in addition to my other responsibility is actually working with H2 Ventures, which is a venture capital firm, because I'm trying to get into venture capital. And H2 Ventures is literally in Australia. And I'm doing like a virtual project with them. And GSU actually provides that opportunity through Forage. I can share the link with you if you want to share with other students. So I feel like you don't have to wait till you get a study abroad opportunity in case that might be too expensive. There are other ways you can actually see part of a global team and still understand their perspective. So for me, I didn't do a study abroad, but back home, I had a lot of business trips that were in other countries. So for instance, one experience was when I had to do like a business strategy training for a Francophone country in West Africa. They don't speak any English, and I was doing training in English. So I had an interpreter, so it was a beautiful experience, having to, break down the processes, for business leaders and also corporate individuals that were trying to get into business, and having an interpreter explain it to them. It was, so one of the things that I did, and I always do whenever I get into a new country, is to actually go to the local markets, go to the local restaurants, kind of imbibe myself in the culture before I try to introduce mine to them. So, like you said, Maxine, building empathy, you get to understand and experience, the culture. You cannot impact someone that you don't know. So I read something recently on LinkedIn that empathy first before leading. you need to understand and, embrace them first before you actually sell whatever, you're trying to sell to them. So that's one of the things that I think is being very valuable in terms of study abroad or being part of an international project. You can actually leverage the relationships and the networks that you have right now. And GSU has fantastic opportunities for that. Like I said, I could share some of those information with you. So having to interpret that training to the business leaders, and it was still impactful regardless. And for me, it was very challenging and it was a lot of growth. So I think it also prepared me a lot for all the opportunities and the project that I've been a part of. Global Shapers as well is in over 400 countries across the world. So it's a World Economic Forum initiative, and then you having to work with different hubs across the world, some in China, some in Singapore, some in Japan, some in India. It's just really beautiful to be a part of a global organization, and that would also expand so for instance, if you have a study abroad program, you could actually connect with all the global shapers in all the regions as well, and that would also expand your experience. Yes. So
yeah, I can go really quick to round off this question. So a little bit of context, I moved over to Austria. Half my family's Austrian. So I moved over there when I was quite young and moved back to the States when I was about 13, 14. And so spent several years then going to high school, middle school in the US, and kind of got an itch to go back to Europe. And so I did my whole undergrad career in the Netherlands, where I had no connection, no family. And it was first and foremost, the program was really just aligned with what I wanted to do. But I was also had this kind of yearning to be somewhere where I could be uncomfortable and kind of force myself to adapt to an entirely different culture, different system, place where I had no network. And it was one of the most rewarding experiences of my life, and developed so many soft and hard skills from that. And so I share this because, the experience of studying abroad, living abroad, even just traveling, it can give you a commonality with people that you meet then, whether they've traveled to those places or whether they're from there. I found it's been such an incredible, just an icebreaker, really. You're having a conversation with somebody, and it's a way that you can just initiate a conversation and develop that relationship further. And then also from a linguistic standpoint, if you're able to pick up the language while you're there, just how valuable that is. Not just in the job market, but really, again, coming back to Maxine's point about relationship building and how important that is. Even if you just know a few words, you'd be surprised how delighted people are sometimes, just that you're making that effort, even if you don't have the accent right and maybe you butcher it a little bit, but it just helps create this almost like a common bond, or just something that you can help to extend an arm and try and develop that relationship further. So certainly it's something that when it comes to relationship building is incredibly valuable. But then on another aspect, just in terms of challenging yourself and developing skills that I think are transferable throughout your life and throughout professions. There are a lot of things that you probably aren't prepared for when you go abroad, but then you realize as you reflect on it just how much you've learned from it. So it's hard to pack all of that into words, but all to say, I would highly recommend you take the opportunity to study abroad and also work abroad if you can. There's some really great opportunities, paid opportunities as well, to work abroad, and that's just a whole nother dimension that I think is really valuable.
It's kind of almost like you're if right, and you have those experiences, and you're able to, like you said, connect with others that have had similar experiences, even if it's in a completely different country, but you can both say, yeah, I struggled getting my internet turned on, or whatever it might have been at that time, for sure. So thinking back to your times as undergraduate students, what tangible steps, do you recommend students take to improve their chances of landing an internship or a future job, whether it be embracing those study abroad opportunities or studying a foreign language, even if it's not to mastery, but, more than maybe someone who hasn't, or just any other kind of, recommendations that you might give, or thinking back in hindsight, things that you wish you would have done.
I think just in general, I wish I had done more internships. I really didn't do internships in college, and I wish I had, because I think internship experiences can do one of two things. They can either show you or give you an experience where you say, I really like this, I want to do this, or it can do the opposite and be like, I really don't like this, I don't want to do this, which is sometimes more valuable, knowing what you don't like, because you can kind of, rule that out and move on to other things. So I wish I had just done more internships in general. I think in terms of, giving advice on what can help you land those internships or the job that you're looking for post-grad, you mentioned, we talked about study abroad. I do think that's a great thing to have on your resume, just in being able to speak to that experience during an interview process. I think in terms of, I know foreign language was something that was a question I don't think we've talked about yet. I think for native English speakers, we take that for granted a lot. That, English is kind of the lingua franca, for global business. It's true. So I wouldn't say you have to know another language to be successful in international business, but it feeds back into what Stefan and Ayodeji were talking about, right? Like, you may not necessarily need it, but it helps create that connection when you're working, in the international space, that you may not need it to be successful in your job, but it can make a difference. International business, a lot of it is about building relationships. And a lot of the, the markets that I've worked with, throughout the course of my career, relationship building is, a huge cultural piece of doing business in some of these countries. And so being able to have those, build that relation through that commonality of, like Stefan said, even if you know a little bit, even if you just to make that effort, it can make a huge difference. And it's made a difference. I mean, studying French and living abroad and being able to speak French I can say without a doubt, has made a difference in my career. I actually do use it in my job now. It was not a requirement for the job I'm in now, but it happens that, we have a few partners, one in particular who is located in Belgium, who speaks no English. So no one has been able to get him on the phone. No one's been able to set up a meeting with him. Well, I reached out to him in French, and he was like, oh my gosh, someone at MailChimp speaks French? Yeah, let's get on a call. Let's talk. And he was so excited. And we had the call in French. And I can tell you, I was a little rusty. I had to dust off the cobwebs a little bit. It's been a while since I've had to use French in a biz context, but, it wasn't perfect, but it made such a difference. And he's really engaged now. And he's so excited to be, working with someone on our team again. So yeah, I mean, I just think it's one of those things where you never know what doors it's going to open up for you down the road. So definitely language. Other things I would, recommend, especially for as you're still full-time or even part-time students, there are so many free things you can have access to as a student that will go away when you're not a student anymore. So things like memberships to organizations like the World Affairs Council, or, being able to go to events for a lower cost or even for free, where you can go and network and meet with people in the field that you're interested in. There's, even just subscriptions to online publications that you can get for free, all this stuff that I probably didn't, I probably took for granted, when I was in school. I know a lot of it I took for granted, but take advantage of those things, especially the events. I think, as I've grown in my career, I've learned more and more the importance of networking and building connections with people in different spaces. When people reach out to me on, especially if it's a student somewhere that reaches out to me on LinkedIn who's interested in learning more, they stumbled upon my profile, they want to learn more about career, I never say no. I'm always like, yes, let's have a 15-minute call, 20-minute call. Yeah, let me know what your questions are. I will not say no to that, because people did that for me when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and when I was trying to, understand the career trajectory I wanted to go in. And so I'm always like, yes, I want to pay it forward. So don't underestimate now, not everyone's going to respond to you when you reach out on LinkedIn, but I think you'd be surprised how many people will, or people you meet at events and like the World Affairs Council or other organizations that are doing similar things. So just be really proactive about that. Again, I wish I had done more of that in my undergrad years. I learned these things along the way. So hopefully some of that is helpful to you all right now. The opportunities that passed me by that I wasn't thinking about then, hopefully I can get you to think about them now.
That's why we're having this panel, for that exact reason, right? Hopefully they heed your advice.
Hopefully, yeah. Do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah. Ayodeji or Stefan?
Yeah, I think, and it was touched on briefly by Maxine, I think. Thinking, first of all, whether you've had a job experience already or you're looking for one, thinking about what your main priorities are and what your objectives are, really important. Again, I mean, I had internships where the work I was doing was not at all what I wanted to do, and I knew that, and I amended my search in the future then. But it taught me what I wanted to do and what I didn't want to do. And so thinking about that, reflecting on what you like during school, what themes and projects, things like that, it's just really important to making sure that you're kind of aligning what you like and what you enjoy with the professional role that you'd like to have. And so following that, I think it's important to be intentional about the roles that you apply for and kind of what you're looking to do. And what I mean by that is, if you have a certain goal or objective in mind in terms of where you want to be, organization, role type, things like that, trying to figure out kind of in your mind, what's going to help me get there? What kind of roles will I be able to leverage to access that kind of a career? We all can't step into a role 1 year after graduating and be a director of sales or something like that. It takes steps to get there, but there's not one path. And that's something that I've learned. I feel like I've been fortunate to learn early on. Sometimes it's easy, I think, to get bogged down thinking this is what I want to do, and you get rejections and it just doesn't work out. But there are a lot of different avenues to achieve what you want to. I didn't have an exclusively business background in my degrees or in my internship experiences, but I was able to leverage other skills and other things that I had done to help selection committees and hiring managers understand kind of how that translates into that role and the functions. And so just being intentional about what you're doing, about the roles that you take, and just how that's going to help you achieve what you want to achieve, I think is really important.
Yeah, I'll add to that. So one thing I would want you to take away from this is build capacity. So what I wish I did better was to actually do it like the time travel into 10 years from when I was an undergrad to see, okay, so yeah, I'm studying this degree, but what am I going to be doing with it in the next 10 years, in the next 5 years? Because, during interviews, employers always ask you, what is your 5-year goal? There is a reason for that, because it will shape and define what you commit your time to. At the end of the day, you want to have a meaningful job, you want to be happy, you want to have a good life, right? And either from your career perspective, family, relationship, whatever it is, at the end of the day, you still have that 5 years is going to still come. Either you have a goal or you don't. And I feel like it's important to actually do like a time travel. Think about it. In the next 5 years, I'm going to be this age. What do I see myself do? You could do that during meditation. You could just understand, okay, so what am I doing right now and what can get me there? It could be as simple as joining a club in school. I always say that whatever I do not see myself doing in the next 10 years is not worth my time right now. And that actually helps me to eliminate time wasters or the skill set that might not, be productive to my next goal. So another thing I would also advise is to build community. Community is super important, and it's important to actually build that personal brand as early as you can. What are you passionate about? Sometimes when you're still trying to figure things out, you could actually continue to just build that capacity as you go on. The more you put in the work, the better or clearer the vision or the idea, the dream will look like. So I would say that you should dream about what you want, put in the work, and be in the right circle. Because a lot of times, when you're in the right circle of the like minds, it could be your classmate, it could be people from your other units, it could be also some of the events or conferences that you attend, but the thing about is the law of attraction. So if you're in the right circle, you most likely will attract people that can get you to that dream. Another thing I would also say is to actually build capacity within the university program coordinators. A lot of companies actually reach out to them, so they actually know what steps you can take to get to the next level. So go to the office, email them, attend one of the programs, just build capacity horizontally and vertically. So that's one thing I would push out there.
I just want to jump. There's one more thing I do want to share, because this was actually at a workshop I attended at my workplace a couple of weeks ago. They do these like career sprints where, you do this professional development thing about goals. And they had a keynote speaker. I'm going to drop her name and her recent book in the chat, but her name was Dory Clark. And she talked about somebody who, what they did to achieve their goals. They thought about the job they wanted, and whether it was 5 years or 10 years, and they actually wrote their resume as for that role. So they said, in 10 years, I want to be in this job, and this is the resume of the person in that job. And they wrote, the resume with the skills, and then they looked at what skills they already had, and then looked at the ones they didn't have, and that's where they focused their efforts. And that just really stood out to me in that keynote. And I'm like, that's something I'm even working on doing myself. So I just thought that was a really cool piece of advice and a different way of thinking about that career growth. So I'll throw the name of the book in the chat as well.
Yes, please do. I know we are a little bit earlier than we had planned, but I do know that there is another webinar that's going to be coming on this same channel right after ours. So I'm going to go ahead and close it up, and just want to say thank you to Ayodeja, to Maxine, to Stefan for sharing your time with us today. We appreciate your valuable insights and advice for our global scholars and soon to be graduates and job seekers. I've really, heard a lot today that really emphasized personal relationships, networking, building communities, developing, empathy, and being able to have those connections and commonalities with people, whether it be through language or through experiences, and really leveraging those skills to develop both personally and professionally, which I think is just, I agree and think is just absolutely wonderful, especially that there is probably very little, if nothing, that is not globally connected nowadays. So the more that you can tap into that global network of humanity, the better that you'll set yourself up for in the future. Thank you to the audience who is attending this session. We do hope that you have enjoyed it and have some insights to take away. We want to acknowledge the hard work that you're doing to earn the Global Scholar distinction and to get your degrees and to find these professional opportunities. So please keep attending events like these or others for free or for cheap because you are a student, and make the most of the resources as well that Georgia State has to offer, learning about the companies and organizations that interest you and networking with those professionals as much as possible. We hope everyone has a safe and happy fall semester. And, if you have any questions in regards to the Global Scholar Distinction Program, just please email, put it in the chat here as well, gsd@gsu.edu, with any additional questions. So thank you again, everyone, for being here.
Thanks so much, Kimberly. It was great being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Kimberly. It's been an awesome time.
You're welcome. Thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
You
Take
too.
care.
Bye.